Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the I Don't Like Murder podcast. I'm joined with my co-host Rita today.
Hey, Jenny.
Hi. So I'm going to tell you today about a story from a town that is near my hometown. And it actually is a nurse serial killer that worked at a hospital that I also worked at right after he left the hospital. So it's going to be very close to me, and it's a pretty interesting story. So his name is Orville Lynn Majors, and he worked at it was called Vermilion County Hospital when he worked there. He worked there from 1993 to 1995, and I started working at the same hospital in 1996 in the kitchen as a dishwasher.
Oh my God.
My aunt worked at the same hospital. She's the one that got me the job, and she actually did know him. So that's really, really weird. He was an angel of death. He was a practical nurse that worked at ICU there. So in 1995, the hospital administration asked the police to investigate, because the deaths at the hospital, it's a very small county hospital. So it was really small. Their entire ICU was only 4 beds. So the whole hospital, there were only 4 beds in the entire ICU. So it was a really small hospital. And then, so the police came in to investigate. They figured out that he was the only person that was with every patient that had died in the almost 2 years he had been there. So they started investigating him. They searched his house and his van. They found syringes, and they also found empty vials of potassium chloride. And what he had done was inject potassium chloride and ephedrine, which caused their heart to stop, is how he killed them off. So it's rumored that he was killing off patients that were difficult or adding to his workload, or he just really didn't like the patient, so he would kill them off. So it wasn't necessarily that and I remembered when I heard about it in high school, what I remembered from it was that he was basically helping people in their lives that were just miserable. But when I was researching, that's not what I found. I found that it was if he didn't like them for whatever reason, that he was going ahead and just killing them off. So that's a little bit different.
Right. Now, was this ICU for all different types of patients, or was it just senior patients?
Because all types of patients.
Okay, so they could be at the end stages of cancer, they could have Alzheimer's, or they just could be a regular person who's in ICU because of different, medical complications. So yes, it wasn't like we think of the angels of death in a senior care living place.
No, right? No, okay. It wasn't like that. And I think that like his youngest victim was in their 50s. So It was definitely not. And the hospital I don't think they did any like cancer patients there. It's more of like, now the hospital got their license revoked for being a hospital, and they're now just like an immediate care place. That was years after he was there. But, yeah, so it was always like if you broke a toe or like you had the flu, it was not the hospital in the area that you went to for serious illness. It's kind of had a reputation of you don't go there. And wow. This probably didn't help anything with that. So they ended up in their investigation, they exhumed at least 15 bodies to test. And he was, in 1999, he was convicted of 6 murders and sentenced to 360 years in prison. There was a 7th case that was brought against him, but the jury couldn't decide on that one. So he didn't get convicted of that 7th one.
Right.
But 360 years, that's going to cover anything. And there have been statistical studies that have linked him to as many as 130 to 147 deaths in the time he was there. And that almost all of the patients they had suffered from sudden respiratory failure, which is what the ephedrine and potassium chloride does to you.
So at the hospital, did they just start going, we're just having too many people dying that shouldn't be dying? And it just so happens to be because people do unfortunately expire and they die. And, every single day of those of us who have loved ones who passed away in a hospital. But then obviously somebody was going, this is a 50-year-old who it wouldn't, right. So if someone dies, if someone's in critical care and, on a ventilator and then their heart stops, well, that's to be expected, right? Versus something else. It's like, so I'm wondering if he started getting careless or it just started mounting up. Cause that's what's interesting is like, who started putting it all together?
Well, the hospital administration, they are the ones that, so the deaths, it averaged around 26 a year. And in 1994, they had 31 deaths. And in 1995, it went up to 120. So from 31 to 120. So it was a huge jump. It wasn't subtle jump at all.
Oh my
goodness. So they knew something was going on because
that's what it was then.
Yeah. And there was one day that all 4 ICU patients passed away in one day. So that definitely, I'm sure that can naturally happen, but it's probably very rare to happen. So I guess I don't want to say a good note, but he ended up passing away in prison at 56 of heart complications back in 2017. So he was in prison for quite a while, for a little over 15 years, close to 20 years.
But I was just,
I thought you were going to say something.
Oh yeah, so he pled not guilty, obviously, to go to trial. So did he ever talk afterwards and explain it? Or did he go to his grave saying it wasn't me?
He went to his grave saying it wasn't him.
Interesting.
Yeah. But the evidence was there. You have vials of the stuff in your van in your house. Well, I don't know why you would keep those around, but hey, whatever. Maybe he was killing other people out in the world, and that's why he had vials outside of the hospital.
Or I watched forensic psychologists were saying there is an element, even subconsciously, that you want to get caught. It's like there's this, subconsciously, like a moral thing of going, it's, I'm giving you all the clues, but no one would need, know to look, but, or it could be more psychotic, which is souvenirs. Of empty vials and syringes and stuff. So,
it made it, the way I read it was that basically he just threw them out. Like it was nothing, just laying around, so one thing that I did not know, or remember from back then, and it may have been because the trial was after I had left. I worked there from 96 to 98, and then I moved out of the area when I graduated from high school. So his trial was in 2000, or 99 and 2000. So I didn't pay attention to it after that because I wasn't there. But so the jury, one of the jurors came forward and was uncomfortable with the situation that happened. And this is like kind of our weird twist to look into. But so it was a long trial. I think they said 6 weeks, but it was there were 77 different witnesses. It was long process.
7 people, right?
And they were, Yeah, yeah, and they were sequestered. So
Oh, boy.
so they approved them to have a social gathering of the jurors at the home of the Clay County Sheriff at the time.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, it was approved by the judge, so that's a little strange. There was drinking at this social gathering, and it was also attended by some state police officers, which are the ones that did the investigation. And it was during the trial. They said it was to like relieve some of the stress of being sequestered and having all this, like going through all this evidence and all these witnesses and being away from your family for so long. So they wanted to do something for the jurors to keep them engaged.
Right.
This probably was not necessarily like the best route to go. It does seem a little sketchy. I've never heard of, the sheriff throwing a party for jurors during a trial before and allowing drinking. So the juror that came forward with this information was the only one. The rest of them said there was nothing that was an issue. They had a couple beers at this party, which totally fine if that's all that happened. And it was in the evening. It was after the trial,
Plus, we all agreed he was guilty. It's all good.
Exactly. I think that her problem was, I don't know. It seems to me like sketchy, but I'm very hesitant to trust law enforcement anyway. So to me, that's the red flag to me. But it was approved by the court, and no one was drunk or had been drinking before or during court. It was all after the day had wrapped. They were all, went to this approved social gathering. So, you can look at that either way, but I don't think that it affected the trial at all.
But if I may just add, because that was in 2001, right? By the time it goes, so that's 20 years ago. Okay. And certainly OJ, of course, was in the early 90s, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, it was in the early 90s. Yeah. Big sensation, but nothing like we know now about cases in terms of our entertainment.
Right.
So then it would just be, because that would be a defense attorney's dream to get that information to go appeal. And that's why you fast forward to now, where there's teams of lawyers for a defendant, because they're looking for anything somebody says that could be a reason for an appeal, and they'll use all of it. They didn't do this, they didn't do that, we fought this. So that's a lot of the lead up to why it can take 2 to 3 years for a trial to even, be in front of a jury because of that. But it is so funny, because right now we'd be horrified to go, that doesn't sound right at all. And then, but something like that happens and that juror speaks out, and I bet it's just a snowball throughout everybody would think that's not cool. That's not cool to go visit, because you could say, yes, give everyone a break and almost go rent a big hotel room, like a convention room, a conference room, and then have guards standing around it, and then nobody talk about the trial. And that is another thing we'll do on another show, but really trying to get some guests to talk about that, because the human nature to not talk about a big case.
Yes. Yeah, I've been on a jury and it's really hard. It was a murder case. Jury I was on, and it lasted 4 days, and it was, all you want to do is go home and Google about the case and find out whatever you can, and you can't do that. So and
what we learned is, some jurors a lot of times don't see the entire case that the public can see.
Yeah,
because all the attorneys, the DA and the defendant's attorney is fighting for keeping things in and out. So it's so interesting. Anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt, but just super interesting in terms of a point of where, looking at more and more with each of these cases to say, what was the jury doing? And then I always think, I every year I get called for jury duty, and only 3 times I've gotten close where you get in, you're not just wiped out when you get there to say, oh, you're not part of this group.
Yeah.
But 3 different times I've gotten into the courthouse in a number, and so you get to listen to what the case is about.
Mm-hmm.
And so interesting, but it's really hard not to talk about it, even not being chosen, just not being chosen, and then be really interested in, and then I'm thankful that I didn't get it, because I don't know, looking at a murder trial, that's got to be really tough. I'm thinking I got seated for one, not seated. I was in the last 30, and then they picked all their jurors and their alternates. And then when I went home, because I didn't know what the case was when I went to jury duty. When I went home and I was released, I looked it up, and I was thankful, because it was pretty brutal.
Yeah. It's a weird process. It was, when I was on it, it was probably 15 years ago. The thing I remember is we did convict him of murder on one of his cases. And his pregnant girlfriend was in the court and just staring us down the whole time. And I'm just like, oh, please don't remember me. Cause now I don't know now, as much as I know about trials now, I don't think I could fairly be on a jury, because I've heard too many stories of wrongful convictions, and I don't know that I would be able to convict someone now.
And I saw this great thing about that, where there are certain places in our country where say cities that have a higher crime, a higher crime rate. And so, because the jury pool is pulled within 15, 20 miles from the courthouse. And then, I think it was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I remember, but it was a funny little blurb, because it's saying that, of the jury, has any of you been affected by crime? And like everybody raised their hands. And then, because it was about, the case was about a police officer shooting. The police officer was going to trial for shooting a person. So, but it was just, and then the judge said, and there's, in these circumstances, these are your peers, they're in this world. And so that's really interesting, because and then there's laws for that. Say, because do you have animosity? It's like everybody has an issue. So what do you, that kind of jury, to go, none of us are too thrilled with the police, but that's where we're at. And that's where you landed. Just like committing a murder in a death penalty state. But anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's just really interesting in terms of all of these aspects of it, jury and the state you're in and the county you're in, because the counties, certain things can be different, and then how it's argued and how it's protected. And yet, on one hand, you think there's so much to it, but by having so much to it, it does tend to, when it all susses out, be fair, except in cases, which we'll talk about, which are totally not fair. Everybody was in on it. The DA, the police, and the person ends up, when we talk about like the Innocence Project and cases like that. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I just think that from my perspective, I feel like I grew up in a place where the police were a little bit on the sketchy side. So I think I have that natural tendency to be sketchy. And then when you get older and you hear about wrongful convictions, and right before I went to this trial, I had read a book. I don't remember the book, but it was written by a guy who was wrongfully convicted, and he got exonerated 20 years after. And I'm just terrified of locking someone up in prison for a crime they didn't commit. Because to me, I would rather have someone free that, I don't want to say that murdered somebody, but I would rather let a guilty person free than put an innocent person in jail. I mean, if
Yeah,
you
you're
have
not
to
going to
go,
get on a jury with that attitude. No.
I know.
But the other part of it is that we've, in the last 25 years, we know so much because it's part of our entertainment. Know so
Yeah.
much. But it also starts to answer the question why DAs will choose not to bring a case up,
Mhm.
because that's what I've heard different lawyers talk about, is that, especially defense attorneys, is that people want to see actual proof. Circumstantial cases can be won, but you better connect the dots. Like nobody, like it defies all and any other logic that it wasn't this person, because when they do and then depending on the DA's case, to say everything points to this guy, but there's no actual physical evidence. Well, the defendant's attorney is going to jump on that. You don't have a picture of him at the crime. You don't have any DNA from the crime. You don't have blah, blah, blah. And so yeah, but I agree. It would make the same kind of thing. We answer all the questions, or they call it voir dire, all the questions as a potential juror, and you answer all those questions. And yet if you're really truthful, and that's what's happening right now in the Elizabeth Holmes cases, they've lost 3 or 4 jurors, and 2 women got up and said, and this is days into the case, saying, I feel it's against my religion because I can't help but think of what the future is going to be like for her. Now, she didn't say she felt she was guilty or not, but what else would you think it would be? Because why would you care if you're thinking,
I mean, if you think she's going to be free, then you wouldn't have any guilt about that.
Right. So 2 jurors, one right after the other, just came out and said, I just don't believe that I can put someone through that.
Yeah.
And the judge said, that's not your job. Your job is just to be a finder of fact and make a decision based on what's in front of you. And
but it is more complicated than that.
Right. Because I think too, and you've been a juror. I haven't made it the whole way, been through everything, but that I was in that last group of 30 and when they picked everybody. But is that to be a jury, that's a whole different perspective, because it's not like on TV. No. And it's really, you all have to agree that yes, there's enough here. 12 people have to say there's enough here that this person is guilty of it. And so, but there's so right. And I'm sure it's hard for 12 people to agree, but no sometimes, but it's so super interesting because there's all these we all bring our own experience to the table, but then it would be impossible to think I guess it all depends too. You see something really hideously heinous, harm to a child, or just something so beyond egregious behavior in addition to the murder, then I think then I don't think that even crosses anyone's mind to go, yeah, he's guilty and he should be in prison the rest of his life. I've been proven. If there's any wavering, it all depends on how you feel. Do people?
But I also think that's a problem with people being wrongfully convicted, because you see something so horrible, and a lot of people, I mean, if you don't watch any kind of true crime, you probably have no idea about how confessions work and how so many people confess. Because I would think anyone would think I would never confess to something I didn't commit. However, it happens all the time. And if you see something so terrible and then you think, well, this guy confessed, or they have enough evidence that they think this is a guy, they're the professionals. Why wouldn't, I want to convict him because I trust in the system.
Right. And
instead of
and the way it's set up is the DA, the judge, they're all authority. And even though they say you're presumed innocent, it's like, well, they've been locked up.
Yeah.
Innocent people aren't locked up, right? On suspicion of, right? So there's enough proof to keep them behind bars.
Yeah.
But there's so much to it. That's why we're doing this, because it's really, really interesting. But back to your case, so what happened to the hospital after? Did the hospital just kind of, like after the conviction, the hospital came out and said, we didn't want this to happen, of course, but because I would imagine the hospital would have a tremendous reputation problem.
Yes. So I actually started working at the hospital right after he left. It was
Wow.
it was months after. It was less than
Yeah.
a year after he left that I started working there. And from my perspective, it was business as usual.
Mhm.
You know, of course, I'm sure they came out with statements, and the hospital administrators are the ones that said something's going on here. We need to
Yeah.
investigate.
Right,
So they obviously, and it was within, you know, a year. I think he worked there a year and a half or so, because he started in 93 and he left in 95. So it was a very short amount of time that they had noticed a problem, got the investigation, and got him out of there. So it wasn't, I mean, yes, it to the families that lost someone, that's a long time that
Right.
they might not have lost someone, but it's really not that long of a time if you think of all the red tape with investigations and hospitals and all that together. But yeah, when I worked there, no one ever talked about it. It just seemed like it was a normal thing. I also worked in the kitchen and I was 16. So, I wasn't paying attention to any of that
Right.
anyway.
But it's still amazing that now, did they keep him working up until the investigation? Or when they noticed it, they say, you need to go on a leave of absence because we're investigating this? Or was he just arrested and that was it?
It wasn't super clear.
Mm-hmm.
He left the hospital before he was arrested.
Okay.
I do know that, but I'm not sure what the situation was with him leaving, if he was asked to leave or whatever, because he actually moved back to his hometown and worked as a florist or a floral delivery person while the investigation was finishing. So yeah.
So it must have affected his licensing of some sort. They must have, behind the scenes.
Yeah.
I saw a case, and when you were telling me a little bit about what we're going to talk about, I had just watched a case about a woman in Canada who was the same type, but she used insulin, and it was in a senior medical center.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, the same thing is that it was the two first attempts, because when she admitted everything, but the first two attempts didn't work, and they survived, but then nobody realized it was like low blood sugar. But then it's like once the first one died, then the third one, and they kept growing and growing. So it's really it's amazing to think, because what's alarming, which is always alarming about these cases. Excuse me, I've got a little hair in my throat, but what's alarming is how absolutely normal she looked. She looked like a nurse aide, but she had a lot of issues, obviously.
Yeah.
And it's this weird, because they said seems so sweet and nice, but very passive aggressive in certain ways.
Yeah.
And then when they brought her in, they were actually brought her in on something else, and her old partner had said they had broken up, and her partner had said something to somebody, but you better watch out, because she was telling that was the interesting part. She told her pastor, she told her girlfriend, she told all these people that I killed somebody, and yes, I killed them. And they're like,
wow,
you're cuckoo nuts. That's, but the girlfriend at the time, before she was her ex, the girlfriend said, you shouldn't do that. You'll probably lose your job.
Wow.
And I remember going, wait, what? I got to rewind this. And she goes, I told her you shouldn't do that. You probably lose your job. But then so somebody said something. So a lot of deaths in the senior center. And the fact that they were investigating it, but for years it was going on. Nobody, and they said she's she's the #1 serial killer, and she looks like this frumpy older woman, very sweet voice, but she says to the police officer, he's like, yeah, by the way, we're just investigating it, not even really thinking she was really that part of it, and she just opened up, told the whole story. Like she's not, proud of it. And yet then she said, oh, because the girlfriend broke up with her and she was in a rage and she wanted to express the rage. And then she said it was the devil. And she said, I felt this surge. And it's just so interesting, but it's mind-boggling to me to watch someone just so matter-of-factly say, yeah, I just gave him, overdosed him on insulin.
Wow.
And then she,
So he does look very creepy. He does look like a serial killer.
Yeah.
Like we'll put pictures on our website and our social.
Right.
Since we have a case that we can actually have pictures now.
Right.
But yeah, he does look like the creepy guy you cross the street when you see him coming. So
isn't that wild? And the thing too is that what's interesting is you never think about it because I've had a surgery, always outpatient though. I've never actually stayed over except when I had my daughter, but I was working, I was in labor because the way I was like, it's a 24-hour included. So I remember giving birth to her, 4:44 a.m. in the morning and on my way home at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 12 hours later. You're fine, call us later. But I always say it's like, I don't count the fact that I was having a baby through the night as the same as staying over. But I visited people in the hospital and had people have procedures and stuff. You just never look at your nurses thinking, what, I don't even think I make an assessment because they're the caretakers. But but then when you see somebody going, did anybody at the hospital not notice the creepy vibes, the creepy killer vibes?
Rita, I'm going to send you his picture when we get off of here, and you will see what I'm talking about.
And I mean, that's so funny, but I shouldn't say it's funny, but it's like we do expect, but I also think too, half the time, if I'm visiting somebody who's having a procedure, everybody's in a mask anyway, because they're all like on their way. So I don't know if I'd see it, but yeah, I would. Yeah, it's so funny when you look at as we're delving into all these cases and getting so crazy about, they look like a regular person. I want them to be creepy, right? Like,
I got one for you.
That's right. Finally, that's right. I'll keep being transfixed by these regular people USA, and they got the backyard's full of bones or something. But
yes.
So the end of the story is he died in prison at a young age of a heart problem.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So no
it's
karma there.
kind of karma a little bit, I think.
A little bit. But really, really interesting, and kind of with the theme of our hometown murders.
Yeah.
Right. That's a good one. But great job.
I wanted to do this one since you did the preacher, and I thought, well, this is the perfect thing. I mean, how many people work at the same hospital as a serial killer? Probably not that many. So hopefully not that many.
And for shows to come, the more we look into it, and especially I told Jenny, I was almost afraid because I remembered there's another murder in my town. And I know people. I didn't know the person who was murdered, but I know the children and extending people in the family, extended family and friends. And because I think too, peripherally, we just don't think it's happening around us. It just seems like a whole other world. And yet, and so I told Jenny, so I'm kind of afraid to keep looking into my quiet little town. Because, but we will. That's, Jenny's got her hometown murder. I have mine. And I'm not going to do the other case because I'm that's all I'm going to do for my town. There's a lot of towns in the country.
You gotta stop that.
Yeah. We'll go up. But Jenny, thank you. That was really, really interesting.
Thank you, Rita. Thank you everyone for joining us on I Don't Like Murder podcast. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Follow us on social media. All the links will be in the description.
Yay. And yes, and then write in the comments if there's a case that you'd like us to talk about. That'd be awesome.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. We'll see you on the next show. Bye. Bye, Jenny.
Bye.